It's a great day here at Will to Win Gaming's Patreon, bringing you an exclusive video for you patrons. It's going to be a Zoro full guide. And with that, I have today Josh Graham, aka Impact, one of our many established players on the team. How are you doing today, Josh?
I'm doing pretty good. I've been excited to get this going for a while. Zoro is one of the main two decks that I play.
Yeah.
I'm known as a Whitebeard player, but I started with Zoro and I've been playing Zoro and Law and Whitebeard pretty much since set two.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so there's like reasons why you should be able to talk about this, and
yeah,
Zoro has actually been gaining a lot of traction for reasons. It has some good matchups, and I guess
rightfully so. Yeah.
yeah, I do want to say with this deck list before we jump into everything, because we're not going to go card by card here. I obviously with most things people do take out a card or two based off of whatever they find comfortable for them, but this is what Impact's kind of doing now. I will say with this, he is doing 4 guard points and then 1 Diablo Jambe. It's a little off screen. That'll be on the video during everything because I'll in post editing. But with that, I first wanted to ask why play Zoro.
Okay, so Zoro is in my opinion, one of the top three decks. I think the top three decks are the red decks, so it would be Whitebeard, Zoro, and then I would say Law. I think in that order. Zoro has really, really good matchups, and because Whitebeard and Law are so popular, that's why Zoro's been making a huge comeback, right? Um, I'm sure it's taken a while for people to get adjusted to the new decks, and that's why Zoro didn't start off so hot. But well, I mean, it still won the first tournament, right? But like it just wasn't as popular. But once people have figured out the matchups, they've realized Zoro's still as strong as ever.
Yeah.
Very powerful deck, very consistent.
Yeah. So Zoro's good, it's popular, but I guess why? I guess is the thing. There has to be a reason why it's good, why it's popular. Like what obviously has these good matchups, but what exactly in it, applies to doing well against those?
So against Whitebeard, there's two main ways to attack, right? You can either reduce their creatures and remove them, or you can just poke them until they get like a really low hand size. And Zoro's the only deck that can really do both efficiently. Like blue decks have good removal, and decks like Law can poke them for 6 constantly, right? So those both can challenge like the Whitebeard, but Zoro can do both. It has really good removal with Gordon. Has Otama to turn creatures side when creatures are rested, you can attack them with buggies and Dedans to get good value, like attacking like Atmos or rested Luffy's.
Okay.
Marco is really hard to kill, even still. Even with the blue decks, it's still really annoying if they don't have the 3,000 worlds on curve.
We got that off the screen, but yeah, Marco the red one, right? So
yeah, 5 cost Marco, and the deck has really, really strong closing power. Some of the best closing power in the entire game. You have the Makino Magra, you have the Rush Soros, you have Fiery Doll, and all of this stuff is searchable by different means in the deck, right? So it's just like once the Zoro gets you to 1 or 0 life, it's very easy for them to close out the game.
Yeah, got it. Okay, yeah, I did want to talk about some select choices of cards, right? If those cards ever come up, and I guess one card would be actually the would be 5 cost Luffy. Is there a reason why like we don't see it in this, or is that like an option for some people? The Rush Luffy.
So Rush Luffy was popular last season when people were cutting Rush Zoro. I was never a fan of cutting Rush Zoro because Rush Zoro is literally the best card you can play in your deck against Whitebeard. So I wanted to make sure that I was playing the max 4 copies, and for that closing finish against decks like Rebecca or Croc that put up the blockers, I found Diablo Jump was just a more consistent way to do it. And with Fire Fist, you're able to push through most of the decks that have blockers. You're able to push through with the 4 copies
Mm-hmm.
of Fire Fist, especially if you combine it with like a Gordon or something. A lot of these decks, the blockers max out at like a certain height, right? So if you're able
Mm-hmm.
to just reduce the power, you can Fire Fist and remove 2 blockers and
Mm-hmm.
still continue to push through with your aggression.
What's your thoughts on 9 gate in this deck?
I think it's just a little too slow. When you play the 9 cost, it's your whole turn. You're not able to buff up your board. You're not really able to turn anything sideways because you're giving them an easier attack. Like even for example, if you have the 9 gate and you attack with like a Marco or something, you're only attacking for 6 instead of 7
Mm-hmm.
because you can't put it down on your leader, right? And then it gives them an easier target to attack because the Marco's smaller than your leader at that point.
Yeah, I
So it's
find
just it kind of conflicts.
yeah, it is slow, and I find that a lot of time with 9 gate, right? Well, you're right. It just slows everything down. Now you have one big attack, so it's kind of like you almost switch strategies in the middle of the game from going wide to going tall. And why do you do it now? Why not just go more into your own strategy, right? So that's so I agree with
Yeah.
the sentiments, right? When if there was four, you maybe like consider it, but like you only play one, so it's not very consistent. But I
Yeah, as a one up, it's hard to build around. Whereas, like when you could play the 4, you can plan toward it every game, and it was a
yeah.
little bit different, right?
Yeah, that was hard too. That was a definitely hard time. That was is definitely
Yeah,
one of the better decks because of that too. So,
yeah, it
um,
was.
and okay, great. With that, let's just kind of go into some general strategy. But before I do that, I guess let me see here. I guess actually I like to go into kind of what you're wanting to do. Do you generally want to try to go generally want to go first or second against your opponents?
So, so I would say normally Zoro likes to go first. It likes to go first in a lot of matchups. However, Zoro is flexible enough that
Mm-hmm.
it can take whatever role is ideal. Like if you're queuing into like for example, like a Lucci deck, even though it's off meta, it's just the easiest example,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those decks all have an even curve, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you go second, you can take that from them and basically get
Yeah.
to play on the extra card.
So
But
yeah.
Zoro's so versatile that you can play either role. That
Mm-hmm.
if you had to choose, most of the time you would like to go first.
Okay. Most of them like to go first, but it's versatile where you can probably just toss a coin and call it good unless it's their matchups. The opponent's matchups really good for them. So
Yeah.
okay, makes sense. With that as well, what should you be looking to mulligan for in like your opening hand?
So there are different texts based on different matchups, but I would say the main things you want to mulligan for are the 5 cost Marco. Um, and then alongside that, you would want to mulligan for Ezo, right, to find the 5 cost Marco. Uh, Curly Dedan is always good. Buggy's always good.
Mm-hmm.
And certain matchups you want to be looking for Fire Fist. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and in general, those are the main things. Against
Yeah,
Whitebeard, if you're going second, you want Zoro. So
Zoro. Okay, got it. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I find a lot of time, especially this combo of Gordon and Marco is really gross.
very
But you're
powerful.
saying
Yeah,
you're saying if you can get like either a Marco or some searchers of a combination, then it can be pretty advantageous. I think I agree with that too. So you kind of
yeah,
want to. I think it's okay to keep events more for later. That's what these are meant for anyway, right? They're meant for late game
yeah.
pushes. So um, great,
There's
great.
some matchups you want Fire Fist early, but
Mm-hmm.
the only one really that's very common in meta is against Law, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
oh yeah.
you would ideally want to
If you
just
open three
fire.
fire fists, you might just your law might just have an impossible game.
Yeah,
So yeah, if you see no fire fists in your open hand and no searchers for that, then that's probably definitely a mulligan unless you see like two Marcos, right? So
yeah. Ideally you want to go. So Law normally wants to go second, which kind
mm-hmm.
of works because you want to go first. If they
Mm-hmm.
play 2 1 drops and you Fire Fist on your second turn, on your 3 down
Mm-hmm.
turn, you slow them down enough that you follow up
Mm-hmm.
with a Marco, and they're slowed down
Yeah.
enough that they're not shambling until turn 4,
Yeah. And
which
it
means by then you're
So
beating them up, right?
yeah, your curve's actually really good against them. That's where laws get really tricky. I'm sure you maybe saw Nikki's video where he talked about this matchup. He actually said, yeah, against Zoro, if you have 2 1-drops, just only do 1-1-drop because they might just fire fist it. So you don't want them to get really good value off that
Yeah.
3 Dawn turn, because when they go to their 5 Dawn turn, they don't want to fire fist and like have 2 Dawn up. It's kind of really crappy for them. They don't. It just feels bad on like their 5 Dawn turn because they want to Marco, but when they get to like their later Dawn turns, they start having Dawn up. So we can go more to that matchup later too.
Yeah.
But that's like very key tech that you're saying that on 3 Dawn, fire fisting right away, small boards is pretty gross, especially against that kind of play style. So
Yeah.
got it too. And then I did want to go over a slight stylistic difference too. I know this is a build that's very event centric. Is there ever like room now these days for eventless Zoro?
So Richard Yam's been playing Eventless Zoro for the better part of the last like 4 or 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
And he's him and Deep Patel are the only 2 people that have had any success with this deck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that means that they're just insane at the game, like they're the only ones that know how to pilot the deck. But the most popular build has definitely been the event build. I think a lot of it goes into not people not knowing that they can just attack their Marcos because they don't have events to revive. But when I was testing, I greatly preferred the event builds just because I found them a bit more consistent. And Fiery Doll is a house against Whitebeard.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. Also, a really strange thing too. If you know your opponent's running eventless, you could actually play. It's a little easier to play into. But
Yeah.
I play decks that favor into red, so maybe that's why I noticed that. So, got it. With that, what are you looking to do in like the first few turns and as Zoro generally?
So on your first turn, you're looking to play one of your 8 searchers, right? You're looking to play either the Ezo or the Buggy. You just want to establish an early body. You don't typically swing with these bodies until turn 3 or turn 4, depending on the matchup or the situation. But you want to just like get your motor running. Your Ezo, you're trying to find the Marco for turn 3. And on your second turn, you're usually looking to play either Curly to Dan, play Zoro just standing, good standing. You don't want to attack with your units too early.
Try not to attack with them too early. Okay, got
Yeah.
it. With that, are you trying to like just taking damage if they swing at your face? Like opponent swing 5 at your face, you just always take it?
Yeah, I typically take the first 2 to 3 damage. I like to play off of 2 life. Okay. That's just a style choice. I'm very used to OP03 style, where you would just go to 2 life as fast as you can and kind of like abuse. You could abuse the Marco blocker and the radical beams, right? Okay. But after they both got limited, the style mostly remained the same because you need the extra cards as Zoro, and you also want to be able to, while your opponent's attacking you, you want to be able to set up your board so you can mount some serious counter pressure and then defend with the events.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that sounds like really good min game stuff, and I'd agree with most things you say. Especially try not to swing with these little characters before like your third turn because it's people just eat those up generally, right?
Yeah.
But
I do think there's certain matchups where it's okay to swing with them. We can go into that a bit later. And on your second turn, if you know your opponent's going to be playing like a 6K vanilla on turn 2, if they're going second, you want to set up a Gordon so that you can do the Gordon activate effect and then play Marco right away.
I think honestly this is one of the most oppressive things too. Like no deck can really deal with this generally. Blue can't deal with it, red can't deal with it, especially if it's that early. Like you can't exactly remove it because just the amount of Dawn that's required that early, right? Unless they have like a Vista. But like you know, you have to be playing against decks that play Vista, and that's it's not normal anymore, right?
Yeah, it's not normal anymore.
So
Gordon also has this cute little thing where you can buff him up with the Makinos and Magros, get a swing in, and then use the effect to reduce something else.
Yeah, I think that's honestly like one of the better plays too. So
Yeah, it's very strong for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, definitely deserves to be one of those like $20 cards that it's absolutely necessary
It is.
to for Marco, right? If you're going to do any of these plays cuz I've trust me, I've had games this will win you games you shouldn't actually. I would say. This will win you games where
It,
you shouldn't. Um
it wins you early tempo for sure, and then early tempo can snowball into a big lead
mhm.
in one piece.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't always have to attack with Gordon, right? If it removes a
No,
body, if it removes a
yeah,
body, but if it's more like if you had it and you attacked with it and did this, it's like extra clutch. But again,
yeah,
just definitely don't focus on that. Definitely focus on the main thing is removing your opponent's board, which honestly has been Red's biggest strength always.
yeah,
But it's pivoted a little bit different because it is consistency searchers, right? As far as that
yeah.
goes. So,
So
um,
Gordon. I would essentially look at as like a one cost jet pistol if you can combo it with like
mhm,
your little bodies, right? Because you
mhm,
can just use like your Ezos and your Dedans, and if you have this stuff on the
mhm.
board, how many 1Ks is your opponent going to give you to keep their guy alive? Most of the time, they're just going to have to give you the guy,
Yeah,
and even then, you can just Marco it afterward or Fire Fist it
it-
afterward, depending on what they do too,
yeah,
right? You can really extract a lot of value.
yeah, for sure. With that, how would it look like? How are you going to end games with this deck?
So typically, your main strategy to end games with your Zoro deck is you're gonna try and get as many
Hey,
5K
babe.
swings with your little bodies as you
By the
can.
way, whenever I'm not talking, you
You
can
want to
talk.
whittle down your opponent's hand, and then once your opponent's hand is whittled down, it's
Love you.
very easy to just put like an additional Dawn on your leader, swing 7. Marco swings 7 without any Dawn investment. It's just one more Dawn for Zoro to attack 7. Uh, your Buggy attacks for 7 when you combine it with Makina or
Yep.
Magra.
So seven's a really good number
So
here. Mhm.
yep. So you can get in for 5s early to chip away their hand and then attack for 7s. Once
Mhm.
your opponent is down to like one life, you can make those 7s into 9s. You can just put some extra Dawn on your guys, and it's very easy to close out games that way.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. So get him down to lower health. Put him down to 1 health. You can turn those 7Ks into 9Ks. Um,
Yeah.
I guess the one thing is being efficient with everything too. Um, I mean,
hmm
this deck will teach you how to be efficient with your Dawn, right? And um,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a very min-maxing kind of deck. Like you're always trying to get every extra card you can get out of your opponent's hand by just swinging
Hmm.
that extra 5 or Gordoning their guy and attacking a bunch of 3s into their guy, right? You can get them
Yeah.
to discard as many cards as you can.
Yeah. And removing your opponent's field is always going to be really good because that actually lets you keep your field. Right? Removing your opponent's card, they can't
Yep.
attack your rested units, which is pretty
Yep.
juice, right? Generally.
Yep. Remove your opponent's tempo by developing
Yeah.
yours. That's
So,
that's kind of the key to winning
sometimes that
in One
happens too.
Piece in general.
They can never kill Zoro because it's just so aggressive. They're stuck on defense. So that's also a
Yeah.
way to end games. But I guess you're ending games through these conventional ways, right? It depends on the
Yep.
matchup, which we'll go over all of the matchups right now. With that, as I normally do, what is a good strategy for the mirror?
Okay. So the Zoro mirror is all about board control. Uh,
Okay.
and because it's about board control, you want to get as many Marcos as you can into play.
Okay.
As Marco is like the only unit in the mirror that can't really be removed. You have so many events; it's very easy to revive. You want to mostly leave your guys standing in the early game, but don't give them too good of a Fire Fist value. Like, don't play like your Zoro standing if they can just remove your Zoro with a Fire Fist and
Okay.
another guy.
Okay.
Um, Gordon is pretty good. You would think it's not that great, but you can use it to reduce the Zoros and stuff that would be hard to remove after.
Hmm.
You can just attack with your Gordon because you can just play it out and you can attack with it and then reduce.
Hmm.
Um, you want to get rid of your opponent's board, but you can't really chase down their Marcos. If you
Hmm.
want to prioritize fire fisting, you want to get rid of fiery dolls and John base because they don't really do anything in the mirror match.
Okay.
And And ideally, you want to counter out of anything that you can 5 and 6 after the first like 2 damage. So say you're at like 3 life, you want to start kind of defending. And then anything after 7, you can kind of take. You have guard points and radical beam, Marco to defend yourself later. So don't be too afraid to go too low, but also don't go too low that you can't stabilize.
Yeah. Okay. That's so it's good strategy for the mirror. So as you said, try to control board completely, focus on that, and then with that too, you can try to stabilize. I guess don't get too low, but that's the same thing with your opponent. So, but that's
Yeah,
be efficient with the way you're guarding. This is definitely going to be one of those. I wouldn't say faster mirrors, but it actually is a control deck, right? This because this is.
yeah,
It's funny how
it,
this aggressive deck is control. So
yeah. You're trying to control your opponent's board, but one piece of advice that I can give you is don't trade your Marcos into minions. Marco swings 7K for free. Your opponent's always going to either have to give you an event or 2 cards.
oh, okay.
So just point the Marcos at your opponent's leader,
Appoint
and
the
then everything else
Marcos at your opponent's leader. Okay.
you can kind of just use for board control.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I mean, even there might be a time where people have to start swinging with like their otamas and stuff like that. So just
Yeah, I've seen
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah. It actually happens up
Mom.
quite big. They're like Machinoing their Machinos.
Yeah,
It's game's wild. So
yeah.
okay, great.
I've
With
seen someone win a serial Luffy attacking with Otama.
yeah, with
True
Otama.
story.
Yeah, true story. Great. With that, the next matchup that's pretty big is Whitebeard, Edward Newgates. What's your thoughts on this matchup? How should we be approaching it?
So I think that this is one of the true 50-50s in the game. This matchup really goes down to understanding the matchup. If the Zoro player knows how to exploit the Whitebeard, they're going to be doing better. But if the Whitebeard player knows what the Zoro's tricks are,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Whitebeard player can pull a bit ahead. That being said, it is a little bit dice roll dependent.
Mm-hmm.
I think the player going first has more of an advantage. Mostly because the Zoro player can set up going first. They can set up their Gordon on turn 2 so that they get Marco on turn 3, removing the 4
Yeah,
cost 6K, right?
I
And then
can't do
that
anything
tempo
about
alone,
that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they basically have to skip their turn. I've seen
Mm-hmm.
people leave up like Dawn for Red Hawk or something instead of that, and then trying to Marco down the Gordon on the next turn, not giving them a target, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it can kind of go back and forth.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a game of removal chicken. So
it
Gordon's
totally is
Gordon
totally is chicken.
is. I mean, most time what shuts down Whitebeard, and that's why Ace is pretty strong. Or showing up a
Yeah,
little bit now is that it just removes all their big cards, right? And so if you're able to remove
yeah,
all your big cards with the one set of removal things you have, that's gonna set them so far back. So,
yeah. Gordon is definitely the best card in the matchup. And then the best thing you can do is attacking your opponent for sixes over and over.
mhm,
So even for example, if you're going first and you don't have Gordon, a nice play you can do is you can put like 1 Dawn on your leader and then like 2 Dawn on Buggy and attack 6/6.
mhm,
Uh, they're not going to remove your Buggy just because on that turn they're going to be attacking 6 leader and playing
mhm.
cost. So Buggy kind of gets
Yeah.
to live another day, right?
They
So
have to race you. So like, yeah, you're when
yeah,
you have things like Machino rested buggy there, like they're really hard. It's really hard for them to attack those unless they have other things to answer that, like their own Izos or Namis, right?
yeah, they're not happy to attack a Makino. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's a feels bad man for sure.
Mm-hmm. What's so good about them going if they went first? It just stops you from your Marco Gordon play.
So if the Whitebeard goes first, they can go turn 2 Red Hawk, removing a character, and then they can follow up with the turn 3 Marco.
Mm-hmm.
Really slowing your development down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they get to attack with their Marco first, so even if you went and played Marco on your turn, they still get to swing 7/7 with their leader and the Marco. They've likely already done 1 damage and
Mm-hmm.
attacked you for 2K.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a really
and then
uphill
they could,
battle from there.
yeah, and they can also follow that up with a Rush Luffy or an Ace. And then if they do that, then you're getting attacked with two huge creatures. Marco is very hard to remove, and then
Mm.
the Ace is 7K. So at the very minimum, you need like a Gordon or something to remove it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are all extremely hard cards to remove, actually. So, and
Yeah,
Luffy included. So,
yeah,
um, yeah. So yeah, okay, I can see why that it would be dice roll dependent. So if you win the dice roll as Zoro, try to go first. If you win the dice roll as Whitebeard, try to go first. I
yeah,
suppose. I mean, I as a little side topic too. I love how the beginning of like a meta too. I mean, this match has been going so PO2. Beginning of a meta or a new set, people don't really know what to do with going first or second. And they're like, well, I'll try this out, I'll try that out. And by the end of the set, by the middle of it, people are like mad about dice rolls. Like, oh, I lost the dice roll. This is bullshit. Like, it's like that every single set. Like
Uh,
it's chill at the front. You don't know if first or second's good, and then like in the middle of it, you're like, bro, I hate that I lose a dice roll every time. So there's
oh
just
well,
people.
it happens. You need to have a good plan for going first and for going
Yes,
second.
yes.
It's
If you
just
do go second, what's the plan?
so if you're going second, you want to hard mull for Rush Zoro,
Okay.
so that you can go turn to Dawn on leader and then play Rush Zoro attack 6/6.
Mm,
Your opponent's going to try and remove the Rush Zoro, but it's awkward for them because that's the turn they want to play Marco as well. So if they want to do that, they have to attack your Rush Zoro, and then if you defend it with just a 2K, the Rush Zoro gets to attack again. And then
mm,
they want to get you to they basically just try and use that the tempo off of the early Rush Zoro to get you down to 0 as the Whitebeard as soon as possible, and then try and close out the game with Fiery Doll Chambe.
okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's gonna be like generally like your finishing move here. With if they have no blocker, you don't have to Jambé, but generally
Yeah,
they'll have a blocker, so you have to have Jambé. And this is kind
yeah,
of where this really comes in, and that's Fiery Doll Jambé, like that swings for 19K. Generally, you should be pushing them a little bit during the game to push them
yeah.
down
The
sooner.
the ideal thing to do is the turn before you plan on killing them, you try and determine, okay, can I survive another turn? And then if you realize yes, you basically just try and put all your Dawn that you can
Mm,
on like one character, typically on the Marco, and try and swing for like 4 or 5 cards out of the Whitebeard's hand, and then the next turn you just try and finish with the Fiery Dolls instead of going
okay.
in right away.
I guess you have to like think about if you're going to live the next turn generally,
Yeah,
because I mean that brings a lot of knowledge. People need to know. I think I've always said this too. Is one thing about the game is Whitebeard teaches you lethal turns, how to do a lethal turn, and you have to
yeah,
recognize when Whitebeard has a very lethal turn, and when you could survive that as Zoro is pretty pivotal, right? Because
yeah.
generally
It
you
typically
have to kill
evolves you to
Whitebeard
have
over
to.
2 turns. So,
Yeah, you typically need to have at least 2 events to survive.
mm,
But if you have 2 events, you can pretty easily survive.
2 events, yeah, 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 I would say
Yeah,
so too. Yeah, it's pretty fair with that too. And okay, great. Um,
great.
is there anything else you want to say else about Whitebeard matchup? If there's any like key little cards here or there, should you plan out? Oh, they saw their 9 beard. I guess. What do I do now?
So so the main things you want to be doing is you want to every time your opponent attacks with a character,
Mm,
you want your best play is to respond with an immediate Otama or Gordon. You don't
mm,
want your opponent to have like a snowballing board that you never
mm,
want your opponent to untap with two characters in play,
mm,
right? So if you can at least remove one of them, you can kind of isolate their attacks to just like two
mm,
attacks, and that means you're not going to be taking more than
mm.
one life
Yeah,
normally in a turn. You can
because
kind of just
you can be patient with Zoro, right? So you're planning just to let them bleed out and then hit him with a big
yeah,
bang or 2 big bangs in a row, right?
yep. And don't forget that Makinos and Magras can really pump
mm,
up a lot of damage. That
yeah, you can get a buggy or Nizo fat if you draw too many of these. So
Yeah, if you draw, I would say 3. The Whitebeard is can be in like some serious trouble.
yeah, I mean if you draw
They're gonna
3 with an Nizo, what is that? That's like That's 9K. That's a 13K attack from a little guy. That's a 3 Dawn investment for a 13K attack, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very strong. You definitely won't win the game that first turn you try and do it, but you're gonna knock out like every card from the Whitebeard,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can close out with the Fiery Doll. I'd say most games against Whitebeard, you close out with Fiery Doll, so
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
definitely something to look out for.
definitely. Okay, got it. Especially if you search for this, it's definitely a good card to find.
Yeah,
Diablo
it's double
Jambe.
searchable too.
If you see a fiery doll or a Diablo Jambe, it's probably okay to grab the fiery doll because you might fire fist later, like they're little blockers, right?
Yeah, against
Um,
Whitebeard you can fire fist all their blockers, so
yeah,
it's not as pivotal as getting the Fiery Doll, though the Jambe is really good finishing power as well. Like if you can get the two together, your opponent's in big trouble. They
yeah,
just need raw
exactly.
counter.
I'm just thinking if you saw a searcher and you saw Diablo Jambe and
Yeah.
the fiery doll and the same thing to finish the game, it'd be really good to have fiery doll, and you may have to
Yeah,
just
it's better to take the doll for sure.
yeah, got it. Unless you have another doll in your hand already, which is pretty nuts. So actually, that might
Yeah,
even
that's
be crazier. Actually, that might be
even be
really
better.
crazy.
Yeah,
That actually might be
yeah,
better. That's interesting.
yeah.
Okay, great. That was a really good matchup for that. With that, the next matchup I want to go over is Law. What should we be looking to do when we're facing against Law?
So Law, you can go first or second. I like to go first just because with Zoro, if you can land the turn 3 Marco, you can really put the Law into a bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Mostly just because like a one gone investment attacking 6K 7K with your leader
Yeah.
and the Marco every turn. Not to mention you're typically removing like one of their key units. Most of the time you want to be removing blockers.
Mm-hmm.
If you can Fire Fist 2 units on turn 2, I would say go ahead and pull the trigger, but most of the time they're not going to give you the best Fire Fist on turn 2, or they're
Mm-hmm.
going to like really load up their board with like 4 1 drops or something, so the Fire Fist might not be as good, but it's still going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
But later in the game, you can use the Fire Fist combined with Gordon or Otama to remove 2 threats at the same time,
Yeah.
typically like a Zoro and a Law.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the best ways to close out games against Law is to just Fire Fist 2 blockers in the late game as well,
Mm-hmm.
and just turn
Should
everything sideways.
if they have characters sideways, which they probably never will, you should probably attack them, right, and try to get the value out of their hand. Now, is this a
Mm,
value game or is this actually just rushing them down where they lose all their cards in life?
So it's a bit of both. Most of the time, if the Law player is good, they're not going to leave anything rested for you to just like take advantage of.
Mm,
Um, what you can do is you can like try and fish a little bit. Like you can attack for 5 with like one character to see if they'll block with a 6K blocker, and then you can just like reduce it with like a Gordon or something, and then just try and pick at it, right? See what they
okay.
give you. But most of the time, the law doesn't leave if anything rested until it's everything rested. You know, they're gonna try and play board control against you, so it's gonna be one of those matchups where you're not turning your stuff sideways until you have at
Mm,
least a Marco in play.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because Marco's really going to be the more annoying thing. They can't actually. It's really hard for them to get rid of it, right? So.
Yeah, it's gonna be very hard for them to kill it.
Mm.
In this matchup, Fiery Doll is not that great. Most of the time, it's just gonna be pitched to Fire Fist. Uh, you
Jambe is
can
probably goaded here, but
Jambe is really good. Yeah, most of the time they're gonna do whatever they can to prevent you from putting them to 0, but sometimes it's inevitable.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Um,
they'll go down to 1 and they'll sit on 1 forever if they can.
yeah,
But that might be if you get them down to 0, like you probably if this is in your hand, you just probably win because
yeah,
they
you
never
can steal
have
a
10K
game.
counter in their hand.
It's hard. It's hard for sure to have the 10K, especially if you can combine it with
The
the
fiery
Fiery
doll.
Doll
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
you're swinging for like 17K with your leader, right? So
Yeah, not to
yeah,
mention you can also just like if you have stuff like the Marco on the board too, it's also swinging for 7, and
yeah.
You can get cards out of their hand too.
Well, usually they're probably blocking at that point, but
Yeah, you start with the Marco. You don't show them the Jambé until.
yeah. Well, if you searched it, then you have
Yeah,
no choice. But generally, you're
yeah,
you're probably gonna see this from the search more often than just hard drawing it. But I could be wrong, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. If you do see it from the buggy search, then
mm-hmm,
your opponent's forced to play around it the whole game.
mm-hmm,
But that also means if they're playing around it the whole game, they're giving you a bunch of cards to not go to zero as well, right? And then you can find those sneaky opportunities to like double Makino a guy
yeah,
that they can't protect, right?
yeah,
And then they have to go to zero, and then the next turn you can close out.
absolutely.
Um, yeah.
Um, yeah, great. If you don't mind, I'll just go on to the next matchup unless you have anything else to say about Law.
If you go second, you're not gonna be able to pull off like a really good aggressive game plan because they're
Mm-hmm.
gonna be able to shambles first. If you can Fire Fist on turn two, then that's probably your best option.
Yeah.
But
It's really weird
other
because
than that, yeah.
I bet you a lot of Zoros pick second from Law, so this should probably be a big thing. Pick first when going against Law. The usually will pick second anyway against you, unless they're
Yeah,
Giga Brain, and I don't know. It's still a hard matchup for them, right?
yeah.
This is like literally
They want
Law's probably one of the better decks in the game, and then has to deal with this, right? So
Yeah, this is Law's like truly bad matchup, right? I would say this matchup is like 65 for the Zoro.
uh-huh.
Um,
Mhm. Okay.
yeah, so I would say if you can go first, if you have to go second,
Mhm.
mostly just try and get rid of their blockers with the Fire Fists and
Yeah.
try and get with Buggy as much as you can too, because
Mhm.
Buggy can't be killed by Slash, and all like every card in their deck is Slash
Mhm.
pretty much. So.
Okay, makes sense. Next deck I'd like to go over is actually green purple Doflamingo. What are your thoughts on generally this matchup? What should you be aiming to do? I don't know what
Okay,
they're aiming to do at you. I'm assuming they're trying to remove board and then kill you later, but
so how originally Zoro fell off kind of in Japan was because they thought that the Doflamingo matchup was favored for the Dofi,
uh-huh.
and it turns out that that's not really the case when you have Gordon and Fire Fist.
Yeah.
So Gordon and Fire Fist does a good job of eating up the Dofi board, right? When they go
Yeah.
Luffy and
Lufuta.
Tagai and yeah, Luffy Uda, you can just go like Gordon Fire Fist. See you later,
Yeah.
right?
It answers their board pretty good. Yeah, that's gross.
Yeah, so that cost them 7 Dawn to put that into play, and it costs you 4 Dawn
4.
to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good swing in your favor. Ideally, you have to be wary of a couple things. The Punk Gibson is going to be is just going to be a house against you. There's not really much you can do about it most of the time playing around it because
Mhm.
you're just going to have a bunch of little guys that they're going to be able to rest and attack.
Mhm.
Sugar is annoying. They can rest your guys and attack them. But in general, against any green deck, like Marco, 5 cost Marco is like a superstar.
Mhm.
Because any green deck falls apart if the opponent has board and they don't. And Marco is the king of the board, right? So
Yeah.
it's like very
Yeah.
easy to just land Marco and snowball from
Yeah,
there.
sounds really good. And the thing is too, the little interaction here when someone plays on a sugar, when you play on a Marco, you can KO the sugar so they can't use the skill, right? Which
Yeah.
I don't think that works in the sim very well, but it that's what it's supposed to do. And
Yeah,
um,
you kill the sugar with the Marco
yeah.
and it doesn't
it
get to
feels it
activate.
feels very bad to play down a sugar and then have a Marco be played down. It feels super bad because it's
Yeah, because
kind
sugar
of it slows down your opponent. So yeah,
yeah, sugar's supposed to be the card that like 2-for-1s against all these like kind of decks, right?
yeah,
And then when they Marco it, it's a feels bad for sure.
yeah, yeah, exactly,
Um,
exactly.
so
Mhm.
mostly you want to attack for fives uh against Dofi. You don't want to go sevens as much because they have 12 events, right?
Mhm.
So if you could just like poke them down fives and sixes, they're gonna run out of cards in hand to
Yeah.
defend. And then
I
they're going to be
guess
locked into like one event,
you'd
right?
be forced to swing 7 with Marco, right? But
Yeah, but yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
that's
it's
not
not really an
really a
issue.
problem.
Yeah.
You can also, if you have the Dawn, you can put 2 Dawn on the Marco and attack for 9.
Yeah.
It's an event plus a card, or they
It
take a life.
especially if it's like your first attack, so they have to think about it in the form of Pump Gibson, right?
Yeah,
But sometimes it depends on how many characters you have. If you have too many characters, it doesn't matter what they Pump Gibson because you have too many characters. So
yeah.
um
I like to start off with just as many 5s as I can.
five.
Once I get to like my 7 Dawn turn, I kind of just attack a 5s as many as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Try and whittle down the opponent's hand. You want to make sure that if your opponent plays down Guild to Zoro, you don't let it live. You
Yeah.
have Gordons and Otamas and stuff that you can just like kind of remove, combine with Fire Fist. Uh, you don't want that card drawing too many cards,
That's
just
how they
because.
win. So
Yeah,
that's their
that is how
wicked.
they win.
Yeah, and then 10 drop's really slow for them. That's actually feels like sometimes a dead card,
So
but
yeah, it's too slow in the matchup. Most of the time, they're gonna have like 5 characters in play by the time that they're gonna play the Dofi, right? So it's like you're gonna have just too much for them to deal with, and it's just gonna be very slow for them.
yeah, I think
Um,
another thing too, map out your opponent's hand while you're attacking them. You can pay attention when you're swinging
yeah,
5s and 6s. They're gonna be like, well, I guess
eventually,
they have
yeah,
5
eventually
cards
they're
in
gonna
hand.
have
They're
to
gonna have to
take.
take it, and you're like, well, they have like 5 dead cards in their hand. That's pretty bad. So,
Yeah,
um, that's when you can start actually swinging again for even 7s, and then they're really in trouble, right?
yeah. If you can get them, if you can get their hand down to like a range of like, it's probably like one event plus some amount of bricks if they're like taking
mhm,
5s. They don't want to like use the event on like a 5K swing, so they can kind of hold it back. But you can also abuse that too by like swinging big on your last attack too. But
mhm.
most of the time, it's just going to be
Yeah.
5 central.
I mean, if I was a Grape Delphi, I'd probably just event the first one. So, but I guess it
Yeah,
depends. I guess it just depends, right?
yeah. If you event the first one, they can start attacking 7s too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind
Yeah,
of
it's
messy.
actually more of those damned if you do, damned if you don't, and it's usually damned. Ooh, it doesn't matter. Yeah, so there's damned.
Yeah, yeah. So long as you can Gordon and Fire Fist
Mm,
the Luffy turn, they're not going to have any kind of real chance.
yeah,
Brook into Nami can be annoying, but
yeah,
if they're attacking with their guys, you can easily just deal with it. It's another really clean Fire Fist if you can
yeah.
like Otama Fire Fist them
Yeah,
too as
exactly.
well, right?
I think a big thing in this matchup too is that well, their deck's generally inconsistent, but
Yeah, their deck has a good chance of just falling apart on
yeah,
itself.
I mean that's just kind of the thing with that. But I will say when it comes to like probably this matchup, if your opponent sees a Brook is just one of the best cards in like green. I think personally because of
Yeah,
how much it does. So
Brook's kind of crazy. Yeah,
yeah,
that is the one card I'm not happy to see is the Zoro. Like if they
yeah.
can go like
It,
Luffy, Brook, Nami,
yeah, if they Luffy Brook Nami
activate effect.
you like damn, that's it's just an extra card for you to deal with. It's an insane value, right? So,
Yeah,
but Uta is kind of a weird card here too for them, um, especially if you do any sort of Jombe thing with that. They have to like deal with that to begin with, and they're like, I don't even know what to do because I can't even Jombe,
yeah.
can't even Uta with this. So it's bizarre.
Jambe
It's
is also crazy against their deck too.
yeah, exactly. Actually, that's why
Yeah,
in Whitebeard, like seeing a 5 drop Luffy is just broken. Like you just, it's like, oh,
yeah,
I'm unblockable. Like actually, that's a big thing in law. Law
yeah,
strategy is to see that, and then they can't do anything. They're like, well, I guess I just
yeah,
lose to Luffy swinging at me every turn. So
yeah. Because they just protect it. Yeah,
like
because green purple doesn't really have any removal. Right? Like
it
their
doesn't.
removal is just character swings, right? So
Hmm. Yeah, that's actually been Green's biggest issue ever. There has been people playing 9 drop Kaido, but I think that's maybe that slows them down a lot, right? It doesn't
It's
really
like
do much against you.
it's like a finisher, but yeah, it's not really great against Zoro, right? It's just way too
Yeah,
slow, and
I
they cripple themselves too much.
it does, but I can see it working in some matchups. But
Yeah,
it's not exactly meant for this. Oh yeah, I'm gonna KO your 3-cost Zoro with my
yeah, with the
with this,
Kaido.
and then swing at your buggy with my Kaido. Like, yeah, it's pretty bad, right? Guild to Sorrow is
Yeah.
how they win most games, by the way, guys. So that's what I would say. I think that if people play around this card like it's the holy grail, because drawing 2 cards every turn is actually just broken. So
Yeah,
um
especially in this game, because like the cards in your hand is basically your life, right?
mhm.
You can defend yourself. And if you're drawing 2 extra cards every turn, it's like
Yeah.
it's impossible for most decks to deal with. So
Yeah, and it's basically
you have
draw
to
2
just
for
kill it.
free at 10 Dawn, right? Because
Yeah.
they can even play like a 10 drop and do that, and you're like, well, um, it's gross. That's all.
Hmm.
Very good card. Okay, I'll just go on to the next matchup too, if I can.
Hmm.
Rebecca.
Okay, so Rebecca is why Zoro originally fell off as well.
Mm-hmm.
In Japan, Rebecca won 3 big tournaments, and people thought that would translate over to our meta as well. We could say it didn't, right? I think we can confidently say that Rebecca did not make as big a splash over here as it did in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, though in that matchup, so there is a couple things that I would like to point out. Fire Fist is really good in that matchup, as it is in most matchups.
Okay.
You want to be able to just like Fire Fist their blockers after the Sabo turn, like like they Sabo and then they're immune, and then the next turn
Mm-hmm.
you want to remove them, right? Because they can turtle up with the Bartolomeos and the Ideos, right? So you want to be able to
Mm-hmm.
just remove those with the Fire Fists. You want to be swinging as big as you can with your leader for the
Mm-hmm.
first couple of turns.
Okay.
Uh, you don't really want to play like one drop at a time because they have both Leo and Heroes that can remove them.
Mm-hmm. The Dans are really good here, by the way, guys.
Yeah,
The Dans are very good.
The Dans are good. Zoros like Rush Zoros are good.
Yeah.
Marco can be good. It's kind of slow. If they 3,000 worlds it, it's a feels bad man as well.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't have the 3,000 worlds and the Marco gets to stick,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you can run away with the game.
I guess one thing I want to do for our patrons too is kind of explain how Rebecca wants to play generally too, right? Because some of them may not
Hmm.
know exactly. Well, how do I combat this strategy? I don't even know what they do. So
Yeah.
Rebecca generally they actually don't care about your opponent's life. They're only going to stall out, drain your opponent's hand, build board to only attack your opponent's characters, and then somehow edge the game out in that way because they draw a lot of good cards, right?
Yep.
Um,
They basically draw 2 every turn, and they're trying to make it so that you don't get any cards from life.
mm,
They're trying to starve you, and then they're trying to remove. Eventually, they'll get to a point where they're like attacking you with just Kairos, like removing like 1 life a turn, and then trying to close out the game with like Luffy King Gunga combo.
yeah.
Uh, so how we try and counteract that is we make it so that Rebecca has too big of a hand that they can't use their leader skill to draw 2 cards.
Mm,
And you can do that by making big leader swings early.
mm,
Uh, Fiery Doll is a good card in this matchup, but not in the reason that you'd think. Um,
mm,
if you have the opportunity to develop board and then play Fiery Doll after and just swing with your leader for like 9, 10K,
yeah.
they're not going to be able to counter out of that. You can use it as a closing card as well, but most of the time, you want to just look at it as like
Mm,
2 mana, your opponent takes a life,
yeah.
right? Like 2 Dawn,
And
your opponent takes a life.
yeah, and generally too, I want to say the way they like to stall is they'll counter out, but then they start just playing blockers after blocker, and that's
Yeah,
Fire Fist is very good against this. Only problem is they're not giving you a ton of cards to draw and fuel, so you have to battle
yeah.
both of those things, which I would say this matchup is unfavorable, but you're
It
still
is
Zoro.
unfavorable, yeah.
You're still Zoro. You can still attack for big and also
Yeah.
cause them to. You're basically kind of forcing them in a situation. If they make basically a few mistakes, you can actually steal the game, right? And they
Yep.
have to make a lot of actions in order to not make all those mistakes. So
Yeah. One good tip I can give as well is play if you're gonna play 1 drops, you want to play multiple 1 drops in the same turn.
okay.
so that they can't remove everything.
Mm.
And then you want to cash in like pretty much immediately by going with your like Augur Machinas
Yeah.
on whatever sticks and
Yeah.
try and
If
getting
so, I guess if you can on like that turn, you can play like Gordon, Buggy, Ezo, like all in the same turn.
yeah, and try and yeah, if even if it's like you skip turn one, which is kind of counterintuitive, like you
Mhm.
skip turn one and then on turn two you play like 3 1 drops,
Yeah.
that's a kind of
Yeah.
play that you
Even
can
if
do.
yeah, exactly. I mean, well, you could even wait till like your sixth or 5 dawn. Well, might be kind
Yeah,
of hard on your 5 dawn turn. They go to their 6 dawn turn. They're not able to Luffy you right away. They're probably building things up. And if
yeah,
you on your 5 dawn turn, Fiery Doll drop 3 1 drops, right? And your opponent just now is stuck in a situation where unless they have a Cavendish, they won't be able to deal with
yeah,
this, right? So,
yeah.
which
It's
there are
really
some monsters that have Cavendish. So, yeah.
yeah, true animals.
Actually, no joke. So I faced one recently. I was like, no way, this is happening.
Yeah,
They just
ain't no way he's killing my blockers.
yeah, it was pretty funny actually. But okay, great. Next matchup. Is there anything else you actually wanted to include in this Rebecca matchup? Do you want to try to go first or second if you do win the die roll?
So I would prefer to go second, mostly just so that I can go to Dan on turn two, and then like on or to Dan on turn one, and then on like turn two, I can try and do like a big swing, and then on
Mm-hmm.
turn three, I try and get as much board as I can going,
Mm-hmm.
while also like
Oh.
preventing my opponent from countering
Yeah.
out. If your opponent's playing blockers too,
Mm-hmm.
try and swing. If your opponent plays Sabo, try and swing 2K over the Sabo. So try and swing for 8K so that if they block, it's also going to cost them a 2K and a 1K
Yeah, they'll probably
keep it
take it at
alive.
that point if it's early, but
Yeah,
it's hard, right?
yeah.
And I'm not sure if is going second the play, because going first, you're throwing them off their 7 dawn curve, which is what they use to remove your board. So
So it can be, but the way that I like to play this matchup is I just want to get I want to get as many early characters into play
mm,
after a certain threshold. Like after they played their card. Like if you go first, you can't play a card. If you and then on your next turn you have to like swing big with your leader, and then you
mm,
have to kind of flood.
yeah,
Whereas if you go second, you can at least play like play like the Dan,
mm,
and then you can do like if they didn't play like a 1 drop or they didn't play like the stage, you can go like attack with
okay,
you can go like attack with the Dan and attack with your leader,
yeah,
like attack like five
yeah,
seven, get a card
exactly.
and also get them to
I
take.
I I find this matchup really interesting. Well, just actually Rebecca interesting because I'll actually give you my queen experience. What I ended up doing, right?
Okay.
I swung big first as Rebecca, so she took damage, right?
Hmm.
And then I kind of built up a board a little bit later. But when she gets to 10 dawn, Rebecca could just Luffy King Kong gun, kill anything they want twice, right?
Yeah.
Kill, and then you literally don't have any more board, unless
Yep.
even if you like play things that kill other things, they can actually just do that again, right?
Yep.
That's their thing. So ended up happening is I have to like swing big with my leader, just remove their blockers, and that all of a sudden like I have no characters for them to KO, but I'm only removing their blockers with my leader, my characters, and swinging like 11 with my leader, or like full 9 with my leader. And eventually, I got the win. But
Yeah.
I just a kind of a maybe an idea to do because you do have good removal against their large array of blockers, especially if you go Tom. Oh well, their Sabo has to be the turn after they're playing.
Yeah.
If they keep playing Sabos, that strategy doesn't work. Wow, this is
Not as
hard.
much,
This
but
is a hard.
yeah,
This is
but
a
you
hard
can
game.
yeah, but you can swing big.
Yeah.
Ideally you want to get them low by just swinging really big with your leader, and then
Yeah.
eventually you get to a point where you can swing big with your leader and with
Mhm.
Rush Zoro.
Yeah.
You don't want to use as many. You want to use as few cards as possible because
Mhm.
Rebecca's always going to put you in a scenario where they're going to be like removing your guys, right? So it's like
Mhm.
you want to just keep it all together. You want to like. I even like when I play Ezo in this matchup, I'm like searching for Fire Fist, and when I play Buggy, I'm searching for Fire Fist, Fiery Doll, and Jambay, basically, right? Like
Yeah.
if I see like a defensive event, I'm like pretty likely to just pass over it if I have one of the better options.
Yeah.
The Dan, you're looking to mostly find your searchers. You want to just play stuff that replaces itself, and then you want to play multiple guys and play at the same time so
Yeah.
that you can get the value.
Get the most amount of value, not the biggest amount of one drop attacks, right? So
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that actually is really really good advice. And then one thing is if you're able to get the Rebecca to lower life, they have to start making a decision where they either
Yeah.
clear your board or play blockers. And if they
Yeah.
get in
Most of the time
that,
they'll have to turtle up.
yeah, they have to turtle up, and then that's really hard. That means I mean
Yeah.
it works out
And
for
then
them
it,
if they
it
have a
starts to
sub.
play. It starts to play into your game plan once they start playing down their Bartolomeos and they start playing down their ideas, right? You can just like fire fist them away and keep going.
Yeah, feels
Um,
really bad. They'd have to play down a. I hopefully they don't play down a Bartolomeo because that's a 2K counter. But well, if you're swinging big,
yeah,
they have to have something. So they
yeah,
have
it
to have
is still a
three
blocker.
blockers. They have
Yeah.
to have three blockers to do anything against you, or they have to always have a Saba, which generally they're going to go through their whole deck against you, right? They're going to see Sabo.
It's gonna be hard for them to go through their whole deck, especially if you swing big twice early, because then they're not gonna have the hands. They're gonna have too big of a hand size to use their leader power to filter.
Yeah, and you're not really
Right?
going
So,
wide enough anymore either because it's whatever you're
yeah,
doing is working. So
yeah,
yeah, I guess you're right. I guess maybe in a slower matchup it's different because they definitely went through their deck for sure against Queen, but that's gonna happen against Queen. So
oh yeah. Against Queen, the Rebecca tries to just go through its whole deck and Luffy you every turn
yeah, every
eventually,
turn.
right?
Yeah,
So
it's a
yeah,
fun one. I played one this weekend and I should have lost. He made a mistake that he didn't. I don't even think he realized, um, but it's a weird thing to even think about. But with
yeah.
that, I'd like to go into the next matchup. Actually, is Queen. What are your general
Okay.
thoughts about this?
So this matchup is very Zoro favored from my experience. Um, So Queen, how it works is Queen's gonna naturally have a lot of these larger characters in their hand. I believe on average they're playing 9 to 10, right? So these characters and removals like Red Rock and 3000 Worlds, they're pretty much useless against Zoro, right? You just go as wide as possible, start chipping down your opponent's hand with as many 5K swings, and your opponent's gonna have these like trigger blockers, right? But these trigger blockers, they're like perfectly sized to die to Marcos. They're perfectly sized to die to Fire Fists. Um, you can basically just eat away the Queen's hand. Uh, and if they can't like chain Yamato's every turn, then you pretty much just run away with the game.
I want to take a little bit opposite coin because Holden and I may disagree. We think this matchup may be us favored, but honestly, Queen does have to get lucky, right? That's actually a big thing with Queen is getting lucky, right? But
Yeah.
because you're right, like I've had to Red Rock a one drop because there was nothing for me to do, and I have to get these cards out of my hand. We can absolutely brick. Queens can brick, but
Super brick, yeah.
generally, let's say you're playing against an experienced queen, they're gonna play down two blockers for you to Fire Fist. A better queen may actually just only have one blocker out at a time and keep out the other blockers in their hand to guard out for one case. So that's one thing you may have to combat. They're gonna try to starve you. If a queen ever attacks your leader, just take it.
Yep,
That's
sure.
just a straight up mistake on their hand, even if it makes sense for you maybe to guard it. But there's really, I mean, this is kind of a thing. Try to play off of 3 or 2 life regardless, but
Yeah, the queen's never gonna give you cards from your life.
yeah.
But how you combat that with Zoro is just like you're playing a million searchers, right?
Mhm.
You're playing these searchers replace themselves with more
Yeah.
threats, right? So
Yeah.
you can just find more things to do, and you can still just like remove and you want to be able to like fill your board first and then swing with everything kind of at the same
Yeah.
time because
Mhm.
Queen would be isolated to just their leader swing. And if they're only leader swing removing one guy a turn and you're swinging
Pretty
with like
bad.
4 guys, it's a nightmare for the
Yeah.
Queen.
And it's kind of a weird thing too. These little one drops are very very obnoxious in a way where even if you can, well, they're gonna try not to play a blocker that you can just KO with Marco. They might just do it anyway, just because, well, he may not see a
They have
Marco.
to.
They
Yeah.
have to. Like, well, they may not have to, right? Realistically, they could
They
just
want
keep the
yeah,
1K.
they
in
want you
hand.
to play the Marco so that they can use their removal. That's
Yeah,
what it
exactly. They want to
is.
remove you. It's
Yeah.
actually too slow. Marco's actually slow in
Yeah,
this.
it's too slow in this matchup, yeah.
Yeah, even if
Because
you
it's the
KO a
only target for
card.
the removal.
Yeah, it's even if you KO a card right with it, but it ends up being really interesting later in the game too. I want one thing is because they may hit the late game curve where they might get lucky. Okay, Queen might get lucky and
Yeah.
then see Yamatos, and then you're actually in a big of a pickle. You're trying to figure out how big to attack them for, what cards you can place and get away with, and still have a board, right?
Yep.
And Yamato's going to be a really tricky thing if your opponent, starts having low cards in hand and like they're swinging with their 9 drops, they have no blockers. You just start actually just swinging at their 9 drops thing and getting
Oh
into
yeah, you
and killing those. So
yeah, you wanna make sure that your opponent if your opponent attacks with the 9 drop, you want to try and remove the 9 drop.
yeah, you could
That's 100%
yeah,
thing.
because they'll be at like 1 or 0 cards in hand, and but maybe like 3 blockers, maybe Diablo Jambe, and then kill that. Right? That's
Yeah, or if
definitely a thing.
or even just like put it into like attackable range with like Gordon or something. Like you Gordon it down to
Yeah,
6K and you're like swinging with your
yeah.
swinging with your little guys
That's
into it too.
Yeah, that's where sometimes jet pistol could even come in handy too with like a Gordon jet pistol, but that's kind of a
Yeah,
Luffy thing. But I guess that's kind of a very specific uh, deck that only like one person plays, So,
yeah. Shout outs
uh,
to Russ.
just the rest, yeah. So I mean, you can play jet pistol too, but I guess this is
It's
kind of a
okay.
generic build. Yeah, jet pistol's
Yeah, it's
always been
okay.
good. It's never gotten
Yeah.
bad. It's just the options here are really good. So, um,
Yeah. You also want to play a certain amount of like EZO targets too, right? So
mm,
I've made the choice to go 4 Fire Fist just to make
mm.
the EZO a little bit better too, right?
Yeah. I do want to
Same with the
say
two
too,
fairy dolls.
swinging for sixes late game is pretty effective. Even fives, but I think sixes is just better. To
Yeah, it
swing late
is
game.
because yeah, they have a lot of 1Ks, but they only play like 8 2Ks. And then if you go too
Mm,
big, they have the gum reigns too, right? So it's like
yeah.
6 actually is kind of just that sweet spot against them
Yeah, I think so
where it can
too.
cost them two
Unless they're
cards.
just drawing all their 2Ks, but then, that requires them to
Must
get
be
lucky,
nice.
right?
Yeah, must be
So
nice, right?
must be nice. If they're doing that, there isn't really much you could do with that. And again, they're going to be trying to play around your Fire Fist. Wait for them to slip up to have 2 blockers and then Fire Fist them, right?
Yep.
Because there might
Yep,
be a
that'll be
time where they have to. So
Yep, they'll block. Typically, before they take a life, they'll block with their blocker, so that you're not really going to get the opportunity to like get a trigger
mm,
blocker at a life and Fire Fist both, right? That's kind of how they're going to play it. They're just going to block first and then take the
mm,
life with the next swing.
exactly. Yeah. If you swing small, they'll just guard out of it. If you swing too big, they'll
Yeah,
just block it, and then, um,
yeah. Kind
yeah.
of damned if you do. But the thing is, you have so many swings.
Mm,
Uh, like before you start swinging, you just flood your board, and then you have so many
mm,
swings that they're not going to be able to deal with everything.
yeah.
Machina was really good in this scenario too, because like it's also an additional threat. Say you have like 3 1 drops, and then you play a Machina, they still have to kill the Machina, right? So
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly. That's what sometimes what they'll
yeah,
do, and what I'll do is I'll play down a Sanji and I'll start attacking with this. I have that just to remove
yeah,
something like a Makino.
yeah,
And I mean, it's a blocker. It's rested now, but like, you're probably
yeah,
gonna have to like attack it or something, right? So,
yeah.
or maybe just leave it there. Damn, that's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation if they have a Sanji,
Yeah,
So
it can get cleaned up though. You have the Gordons, and they're not really finding targets otherwise. Same with Otamas too.
yeah. Makes sense. Okay, yeah, pretty interesting matchup. I mean, I think we are seeing things from a different light, right? I
Yeah,
don't know how many cracked
definitely.
queens out there. Maybe you should play test against Holden once because
Yeah,
Holden. I don't know if he's just super lucky, which he is, by the way, but
yeah. No, he is,
he
but he's
he is
also good.
he has solved the Zoro a little bit, but like again,
Yeah,
Zoro is still Zoro, which White is good against Queen. So, if
yeah,
Zoro doesn't see the removal when it needs to, this will get kind of rough. I would say just try to mulligan for more 1 drops would be probably your prerogative, and
yeah.
um,
You want to mulligan for your fast curve, like a bunch of 1 drops to Dan, and then you want to follow it up with like a rush.
yeah,
Basically, just as much as you can, turn on the heat as fast as you can. And if your opponent gives you like these opportunities where like this is gonna sound weird, but like if you have like a buggy and then and then your opponent's like swinging 5 into your buggy and you have a guard point, just guard point to keep the buggy alive.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you actually you're that's a big thing too. That's
Yeah, it seems kind of wasteful, but
no,
it's still
it's very
totally not.
effective. It's
Yeah,
very effective. Guarding out these little guys actually forces the queen to actually think about how they attack. They need to start throwing Dawn on like their leader during certain times, right? So
which makes things really awkward. Yeah, because queen's like pressed for dawn
they
very
are
often.
early game, yes. Early, actually all game. They're pressed for Dawn. They have
The entire game they're pressed for
they're
dawn. Yeah,
yeah. This is a it's a very simple thing they have to do, but it's something they still have to do. And one thing is that sometimes they're going to do is they're going to like start pounding, putting pound or put 8-drop Katakuri in the bottom of your life. I mean that's just
yeah,
removal. That's just consider the
yeah.
card KO'd at that point, right?
Pound is for sure annoying when you're playing Zoro.
Yeah,
If they see like a pound, it's annoying. If they see multiple pounds, it's very annoying.
yeah.
It's very annoying. Like,
Yeah, I mean, basically, in this matchup, it's considered a KO to me, right? Because I'm like, okay, I'll
yeah,
kill
no, it
you
is
at the end
just
of the game, right? So
yeah. I'll kill you on turn 20.
you turn 20, bro. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, definitely
Yeah,
the best way. I mean, most times is just rushing it down. Hopefully they brick, and at that point you just assess it from there, right? So
yeah. Queen can definitely brick.
oh yeah,
And
oh
if
yeah,
and if they brick, they really brick.
yeah.
Like there's
They have to have no mistakes if they brick a little bit, right? So
yeah. Yeah,
but then again.
even just drawing too much event removal is
Mhm.
terrible in the matchup, right? Because
Some
it's just they're
queens
the
aren't deck building quite well either. They still have too many big drops, and so they'll get stuck in their. They can't even Yamato and gain 2 life, on the same turn.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a weird situation to get put in there, but once you get there with them, all of a sudden their games are really slow. And they're just they're just trying to draw off the top of their deck, and you can kind of
yeah,
play around that because you don't have to put it back down to 1 life right away. Especially if they see another Yamato, right?
yeah,
You can kind of
yeah. No, you
think
don't
about
you
that.
don't have you don't have to rush them. You can just like try and blood back the board.
Mm,
You don't want to throw away all your cards basically when you're playing against Queen. Like if you turn all your guys sideways and then
mm,
you just let them remove your guys with their big drops, like you're kind of playing into their hand. At that
mm.
point, you just want to like take another turn to go wide. Also, if your opponent has too many cards, right? It's a gimme, right? But if you can leave your opponent at like 2 life, like 4 cards in hand, like they're not going to be able to heal another life. Too, they can't Yamato gain another life. Like those kind of things actually do come up, and they come up pretty often. So you can just like mount a board and just like leave it standing, and then the
Okay,
next turn everything sideways
makes a
too.
lot of sense. Yeah. With that, I can't actually think of another deck for a matchup. There are other decks that exist. Is there anything
So
you're thinking of?
So there's Croc, which is a free win.
Okay.
You just mount board and turn everything sideways. You don't play Marco against them because they can just remove it with
Mm-hmm.
Soja King, Red Rock, Mihawk, all these things. But if you go super wide with your stuff and you play like Rush Soros,
Mm-hmm.
the Croc basically just rolls over and dies. They don't really have anything. Make sure if your opponent leaves up 2 Dawn to attack with your 1-cost characters first because they can just
Dragon
get
Twist.
Dragon Twister back to the deck.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's very easy for your opponent to just like think that they can turtle up, but again, if they try and turtle up, you have the Fire Fists. Make sure to remove Sentomaru if you can. If your opponent plays down a Sentomaru, like try and Fire Fist it away too. That's like one of the best things you can fire. It's probably the best Fire Fist target in the whole game, to be honest.
Yeah.
But but yeah, that matchup is pretty easy. Again, just poke them down. So we've gone over Whitebeard, Mirror, Law, Rebecca, Queen, Dofi, Croc.
I
There's
mean,
one more deck. There's one more deck.
there's
There's
one.
8 decks. I know there's 8 decks.
There's an eighth deck. There's eight.
There's eight.
Nami.
Uh, Nami, you attack them
Go
as
wide.
much as you can. Yeah.
Go
Oh,
wide.
Katakuri,
Oh my
right?
gosh! Why are we like we missed the most important deck, right? So
Yeah.
Katakuri. What is your thoughts about Katakuri?
So if you play Zoro, it's one of those matchups where you kind of want to play it similarly to Law.
Okay.
And that's like when you just like hit them for fives as much as you can, and then once you've kind of figured out that their hand is full of big drops, you hit them for sevens. You
Mm-hmm.
want to play around. You want to play around trigger characters by leaving up some amount of dom so that you can fire fist them afterwards, or
Mm-hmm.
like Gordon, or like Gordon Marco or Otama Marco them afterwards.
Okay.
Um, want to your best cards in this matchup are the Magras and Makinos. If your opponent doesn't have a pudding, like the Makino is going to take away
Yeah.
one like their leader swing. Um, what else? Parasparrow. I would say normally you ignore it at the start, but if you can like remove it for free, you should do so too, because it's still going to eat away 1k counter or a life every
Mm-hmm.
turn if you just leave it there for too
Yeah,
long.
and generally they're not
Um,
gonna get most of their cards that are Big Mom don't have a lot of counter. It's actually more likely to get like a 10 drop or an 8 drop
yeah,
or some like 1k counter out of it.
yeah, yeah.
So
You don't, and then you don't want to ever let them play 10 cost mom in a safe scenario or Katakuri really in a safe scenario.
yeah, so you're
Most of
pushing
the
them pretty fast so you
Yeah, no,
can't do that.
you're going fast. You're going fast and hard. You're going a bunch of fives into a bunch of sevens. Marco is like
Mm-hmm.
the best turn three play as well. You want to
Mm-hmm.
flood with the one drops, and then you want to like cash in your Makinos and Magros right away for
Got it.
as
Yep.
many 7Ks as you
Yeah.
can.
So tack with your leader at the beginning. Play down your 1 drops and curly dans. 5 drop. Hopefully, Marco. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Do you care if they go second? Do you try to take second away from them, or are you going first?
No, I'm
Always.
still going first. I want
Okay.
to attack them.
Yeah,
I
and
want to
they're
try and kill
probably
them.
not. They're probably not going to go first against you. So you're probably 90% of the time is going to go first in this, based off both your choice. And
I do
yeah.
think it's right for Katakuri to go first. If they can go
Oh.
first and play 7 Cosmo against you, it's kind of annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And they have like the Parasparrow Randolph 7 cost mom curve, and that's like can be really
Yeah.
annoying for Zoro.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a little worse. They might choose first with you against that. Most Katakuris who are not
We'll
experienced
just
with this matchup don't know.
Yeah, they'll just go second for
They'll
sure.
just go second because out of comfort. But I guess experienced ones you're saying may go first. And in that
Yeah,
situation, still follow the same rules, but they may have more options against you. So
yeah. Ideally with Zoro, your best plays are just like attacking your opponent with as many things as early as you can. I would say I would say against Katakuri, you want to get as many 7 swings, and that means you might even skip the Marco turn if you have like 2 1 drops and like
ooh,
you can go like I don't know like
Magra is
Magra.
really good for that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, by the way, if people maybe not know this, but if you have a choice between Magura and Makino, probably play the Magura, right?
yeah, yeah. Because
Actually,
then
yeah,
the Magra the next turn is set up
yeah,
for another Magra.
yeah. The only reason you ever want to do a Makino is that they don't have something to remove it. That's pretty
Yeah,
much it. But usually Makino dies almost most pretty much. He's like the number one target right when she's played. So
yeah.
um,
She dies for free if they have any character in play, but if they don't, and it forces a leader swing, I think that's a good pivot, right? Like I could see a scenario where you're going first and you
mm,
open a 1 drop and then like turn your opponent doesn't play the pudding and then you can go in with like a Makino and you force
yeah,
them to like kill the Makino too. It's like it can be kind of good,
yeah.
but yeah. Most of the time you follow the same general game plan of flooding as much as you can, leave everything standing and then try and turn everything sideways all at once
Mm-hmm.
against the Katakuri, but the thing is you're probably doing it a turn earlier so that you
Mm-hmm.
can get an extra wave of attacks in against.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay. Great. I think we went over most of the relative matchups. Good thing we didn't miss Katakuri. I don't know why that went over our head. Just I'm
Yeah.
very anti Katakuri to be honest, but that's just me, right? So
That's how I count. That's how I counted. I know that there's 8 decks in this menace, so
yeah, eight
well,
decks.
eight popular decks.
A popular. You're gonna see other things that are gonna be fun and
Yeah.
good, and actually be maybe a little more rogue. But we'll go over those for now for OP04. But great. Yeah. Did you have any closing thoughts on the deck, on the list, any matchup?
So Zoro's a very skill testing deck, and the more that you play Zoro, I feel like the more you're going to get rewarded when you play Zoro. There's going to be a lot of times with Zoro where you're going to have to make an unintuitive play that doesn't go with these strict guidelines. And you're going to have to find those based on experience. Most of the time, those are like when to turn on the heat. Because like you can be attacking your opponent for fives and stuff all you like, but you're gonna get to a point eventually where you want to start swinging big with like a couple characters with the Zoro, and get your opponent and really force your opponent down to that like 1 to 0 life area where you are where you're like you're dominating them basically. That's where you're trying to get to. But yeah, the more that you play Zoro, the more you're gonna get rewarded for it. The deck's been good since OP02, so
it's been good since OP01 too. It was a high roll deck in OP01 actually. So definitely a very good deck in OP02.
In OP02, it was probably the best deck, and then after that, it's always been a great deck, right? So it's like it's just one of those decks that's been around for forever. If you haven't had a chance to pick it up and play it, I highly recommend you do. It'll make you a better player. I promise it will. It'll make you better at just One Piece in general. Like even if you become a good Zoro pilot, I'm pretty sure you can become a good anything pilot.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, and it's okay. Got it. Well, great. I want to thank you for coming on with us today. You know, this will go on the Patreon very soon, and I guess we'll maybe see what OP05 holds with the next one of these guides, right? So,
yeah.
Thank you all so much for watching this video, Gay. I am very tired. So with that, I'm going to end the video. You all have a great rest of your day. See you in the next one. Ciao.